Well, back to the regularly scheduled program after a week off. I'm glad to be back and doing this. Glad that New York Giants football is back, everybody. This is the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, comment as well. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Share this out, do all the good stuff. We're still counting down to 800 subscribers. I feel like we could get there by the end of the year, maybe even by the end of the month. A lot of good stuff coming your way, of course, on the channel as we keep going through the offseason of the MLB, the Giants, the Jets, Boys in the Big Apple, a lot of other different things as well. So we'll keep you updated in terms of content, but appreciate those that have been supporting. Shouts to Dash once again for coming on Tuesday's show and, really breaking down the Giants first half with me and, once again shouting out my channel because I had him on. So we face the Texans this week. Obviously, I do have a loyal supporter in the chat, Tony Clark, who is a Texans fan. So I actually have a bet with him, and I'll say that right now before we go into the first thoughts and everything else, and a couple of reminders as well. So the bet between me and Tony, and Donald as well, because Donald is a part of this channel, he's a Giants fan, is that if the Giants win, Tony's logo on Twitter and YouTube has to change to a New York Giants logo. Vice versa, if the Texans win, we have to have Tony on for his own segment on Monday's show. And we have to have a Texans logo in the right corner where we usually put, a Big Blue in the Bronx logo, Boys in the Big Apple logo, whatever. So unfortunately this week, I do not have somebody to interview. I don't have somebody to discuss with. This is the first time since probably last year I've ran into that issue. It just seems like a lot of people, and maybe it's the unattractiveness of the Houston Texans. No offense, Texan fans, but it just doesn't seem like a lot of notable people cover the Texans. And I usually do a deep dive. Like I'll go into YouTube content creators. I'll go into SB Nation. I'll go into Fansided. I'll go to Last Word on Sports. It just seemed like, either their Twitter DMs were closed, they couldn't get back to me, or, they just didn't have any social media at all. So unfortunately, we will not have an interview this week. And podcast is probably going to be a little bit shorter, but I'll try to make it a little bit longer so we stay, around the 30, 40, maybe even 50-minute mark if we do get there. So, coming off of a bye, we do have a couple of players coming back, hopefully within the next few weeks. And I'm not going to go ahead and say this game is going to be 100% easy, but it's a favorable opponent in terms of, the Giants winning. I think we all know that. They're like 4.5-point favorites as of right now. This is a team that's in limbo a little bit. They do have some nice pieces. Brandon Cooks, Jalen Petrie, Jerry Hughes, Damian Pierce is the most notable one. So it's going to be interesting. We'll talk about it a little later. If Brandon Cooks actually plays. He was listed this week with a wrist injury, and we'll get into the injury report in a second, but he didn't play last week because he wasn't happy over the fact that he wasn't traded. And, it would be a Giants luck sort of thing to have Brandon Cooks not play against the Eagles, but he plays against the Giants. And I don't remember the last time he played us. I want to say it was New Orleans 2016, somewhere along those lines. But the Giants could very well end up 8-2 before facing Dallas. And listen, you can make your cases about opponents and all these different things, but trust me, I would love to be 8-2, man. We'd be 1 win away from officially having an over 500 season. I know there's flexes possibly down the line in terms of scheduling, maybe primetime, whatever, but the Lions, I think, will put up more of a fight. We'll talk about that obviously next week, but we got to go through Houston first. And, Houston kept it competitive in the first half with the Philly Eagles. Obviously, things dropped in the second half. Davis Mills, he threw an interception. I mean, it was more in garbage time, but let's go to the injury report. So, Brandon Cooks, mentioned the wrist injury. He is questionable. Neville Hewitt, linebacker, hamstring, he is out. Jerry Hughes is a go, just some rest during the week. Malik Collins, defensive lineman, chest injury, he is questionable. Nico Collins, wide receiver, second-year man out of Michigan. He is questionable. Philip Dorsett is a go with an ankle injury. Jaleel Johnson, defensive lineman, he had an illness on Wednesday. He's fine to go. Dameon Pierce, a chest and a shoulder injury. He was limited Wednesday and Thursday, but full go Friday, and he's full go for this game. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, the linebacker, groin injury. He's going to most likely play. I mean, he was full for the Friday practice. He's questionable. And then Justin McCray, he had a concussion, and he went through practice fine the full week, so he looks like he's going to play. On the Giants side, it's a little dicey, but the New York Giants, as compared to the last few weeks where we've had like 6 guys that are out, it's only 2 this week. Daniel Bellinger with the eye injury, hopefully he's doing well. Obviously, he did that one interview where he said he still has some double vision, which, I can't say it's a good sign, but, he's sounding confident. Maybe I'm overconfident, but he's sounding confident in his return eventually. I would save him for the Cowboys game, Washington game, Eagle game, because like that, one of those 3 he'd come back in, and I don't want to say once again that the Lions or the Texans are easy opponents, but those are harder opponents. Those are your divisional rivals, and you would love to have a reliable target in Daniel Bellinger back and healthy for that time. But once again, his vision has to come back to a normal form, and just his eye overall. And he's going to have to play with a visor. I mean, a lot of receivers play with a visor, but, I mean, that was just a scary injury right there. Evan Neal, knee injury, he is out, did not practice all week. I would possibly see him coming back against the Cowboys. Obviously, this bye week really gave it a good rest for Evan Neal. Obviously, he injured himself against the Jaguars, so they said, I think, 4 weeks. So it would be the Seahawks, the bye week, the Texans, the Lions. So maybe the Cowboys, and then, after that, maybe Washington as well. They have a tough D-line. You move into some questionable guys who are trending to play. Cordell Flott. I'm interested to see how much time he gets, and I think you could play him in the next 2 weeks. These teams really don't have too many threats at wide receiver. I still think it's going to be a challenge because he struggled in week 2, got injured. We all know what happened after that. He's got a calf injury. He's questionable. So, we'll see. Will they play him and even him out with Fabian Moreau? Will they put him in the slot with Nick McLeod and Darnay Holmes? It's going to be interesting. A guy I've criticized a lot, I'm going to try to have some fan confidence in him, and that's Kenny Galladay. He's got a knee injury, but he's trending towards playing, and it seems like he has a new embraced attitude. Maybe the coaches were like in on him in week 3 when he said, give me the ball, I need targets more, and all this other stuff. Now it's just just totally changed because he's on a winning football team. And, a lot of players could just sit here and say, look, I got paid $72 million and I want the money. I'm going to get the money, but I'm not going to really play as hard. Or, you know what? I care about my own stats, not the team's stats. I don't care if they win or not. Kenny Galladay, as of right now, isn't like that, even though I've judged him harshly over the last few weeks. Hopefully he's at least somewhat of a factor during the game, where the defense focuses a little bit more on Slayton, Saquon Barkley, and Wan'Dale Robinson. They moved to Galladay a little bit more, and their secondary actually is pretty solid. We'll get into the stats later on, but I think that's the best part of their defense is the cornerback room. O'Shane Ximines, quad injury, he's questionable. He is trending towards playing as well. Obviously, with the Aziz injury, he's probably going to factor in terms of pass rushing. I think he could possibly get to the quarterback this week. We'll see how he is with the injury, but, he's also been a little bit improved in terms of the running game. We saw him make a couple of plays against the Baltimore Ravens in the running game, so hopefully, he helps out because Jihad Ward, Kayvon Thibodeau, Tamon Fox, those guys are not playing 100% of the snaps. And also, I find it interesting as well, we'll talk about this a little later, or maybe even after the stats and talking about players and stuff, the Giants have 51 players on the roster, and they could get 2 easily off. So, they could activate guys if they want to. They could take guys off the practice squad. Like, it's going to be interesting. Has Landon Collins showed them enough in the last 2 games? He has no activations left. Has he shown him enough the last few games where, okay, you have earned a roster spot? But obviously with this McKinney injury that I discussed on the Boys in Big Apple podcast, obviously the Dash episode was recorded on Sunday, so we really didn't get the news till Monday. But obviously that hurts the Giants a little bit. They're going to use Julian Love, Jason Pinnock, Dane Belton. So maybe Landon Collins does factor in. McKinney's out for 4 games at minimum, so we'll see. Richie James concussion. Hopefully he is not punt returning, but it looks to be Adoree Jackson, which I'm a little scared of, I'm not going to lie to you. But if Cordell Flott's coming back, take the risk anyway. I mean, Adoree Jackson got hurt against the Packers. He wasn't punt returning. He was playing corner. So, also as well, if you want to combat that, Jabril Peppers tore his ACL last year punt returning. So I would rather maybe throw a guy out there like Khalil Pimpleton to return punts. He did that at Western Michigan, I think. I don't think it was Central Michigan. I remember I said it was Central Michigan. I think it was Western Michigan, excuse me. I would rather throw him in there, to be honest with you, because, hey, listen, that's a way he could earn a spot on the roster in the long term. And then Marcus Johnson, thumb injury. He was limited in Friday's practice. He's probably going to be a go. All right, so now we move into the stats and the analytics. We'll start with the Texans first. In terms of total yards per game, let me just pull this up real quick so I don't misquote anything, because I don't want to do that at all. But in total yards per game, they're 29th, passing 26th. When you look at their rushing offense, well, I'm not lying when I say this. Though Dameon Pierce is, a bull's head at running back, they're ranked 25th in terms of run offense, and that's not very good. Even though Pierce pushes and pushes every game, and he honestly could be one of the offensive rookie candidates, for offensive rookie of the year. But statistically, they're not very good in that category. But that's their focus of the offense. That's what the New York Giants are probably going to lean towards defending. They're also 28th in points per game. Now, defensively, not very good. In total yards per game, they are 30th. They are 19th against the pass, 32nd against the run, and 19th in points per game in terms of a defense, scoring defense and all that sort of stuff. When you look at the analytics, 15th in pass percentage, 18th in run percentage, 26th in pass percentage on first down, and 10th in run percentage on first down. So, the Giants are probably going to fill that box with a couple of good tackling safeties and linebackers. I expect Micah McFadden to really get some good snaps in the second half of the season. We'll see where Tate Crowder is. I expect Jalen Smith to play this game. I think this would be a matchup that's suitable for Tate Crowder, but at the same time, you saw a lot from Micah McFadden before the bye week against Seattle. I would not bench him. I know it's a week in between those matchups, but the iron, strike it while it's hot. Then you look at the defensive analytics, 23rd in blitz percentage, 17th in pressure, and 17th in sacks. Now you take a look at the New York Giants, 24th in total yards per game, 29th in terms of a passing offense, 5th in rushing offense, 22nd in points per game. Defensively, 17th in total yards per game, 16th in passing yards per game defensively, so 16th in the pass defense, 25th in the run defense, and 9th in defensive points per game. You look at the analytics, 29th in pass percentage, 4th in run percentage, 31st in pass percentage on first down, 4th in run percentage on first down, 1st in blitz percentage, 13th in pressure percentage, and 22nd in sacks. So, things to look for this game, like we always go over. Pounding the run is going to be one of the things to look for. Here's where it could be a toss-up between that and maybe sticking more of a passing game for the New York Giants. We noticed against Seattle both ways that both run defenses were bad, but there was like nothing. Saquon had a rushing touchdown, and so did Kenneth Walker. But I think Barkley had 53 yards. Kenneth Walker had something in the 60s, 70s maybe. I mean, I think they only allowed like 87 rushing yards total, which is good. But it just tells you automatically, it's not necessarily so common sense. You got to run the ball down their throats. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And another example is Carolina was very bad against the run in week 1. against the Cleveland Browns. And what happened in week 2? They bottled us up in the first half. In the second half, we started getting some more yardage. Saquon still had over 100 scrimmage yards that game, but it just says, look, it's a week-to-week, operation in the NFL. So it's not going to be redundant. Oh, this run defense is bad. The Giants' run defense is not good, but against the Seahawks, they didn't allow too many yards. Against the Bears, they didn't allow too many yards. Same thing could be said against the Packers. The Ravens, they got shredded. Same thing could be said for Jacksonville. So, once again, make your case with that. When I was talking about the passing game is, I think Mike Kafka towards the second half, and it's a tough ask, but I think he's going to want to utilize the passing game a little bit more, whether it's through Saquon, whether it's through Darius Slayton, Kenny Galladay, Wan'Dale Robinson, some of the other guys we have on the roster. But I think in a perfect world, and I have some insider thoughts, not necessarily in terms of sources, but I have some thoughts on, the whole Daniel Jones situation. I'm not going to give them on here because it's a, game preview. It's not necessarily an assessment. If you want to find out anything on Daniel Jones, you got to put it more in his hands. Obviously, the first half was mostly dominated by the run. See what you can do. Obviously, they elected to not trade for a receiver, which honestly, it's not necessarily a problem of mine. It is what it is, right? Better that they stayed home with all the picks and traded a receiver that didn't want to be here rather than trading for a receiver and that not being, a long-term solution or just for this year. But I think either way, Mike Kafka, Brian Dable, they really want to see what this passing game could look like. And it really hasn't been good, but you got to find ways around it. You got to scheme around it. You got to scheme these guys open. Third down has been really good to the Giants this year. Now, I haven't looked up stats in third down percentage, but I think that's where they get most of their success, which is, you got your third down and longs, and they're playing some zone defense. They find holes in the zone. That's the first down. But against man coverage, like a team against Seattle, that didn't work so often. I mean, Daniel Jones had 13 passing yards to end the first half, which isn't necessarily ideal. So there's a reason to look at more of a passing game from the Giants. I would like to see, once again, whether Brandon Cooks plays for the Texans. I mentioned the thing about Giants luck earlier, because that could determine, will the Giants lock up Brandon Cooks? Will they not lock up Brandon Cooks? Will they let him run free? What's the story there? I think Adoree Jackson could lock him down easy. Not necessarily easy, but I think he could lock him down. But with that being said, we got to see if he plays first, right? You can't lock down a ghost. And then one thing to watch is the secondary and Jerry Hughes' emergence. Now, last game he had 2 sacks on Jordan Mailata, who is quote-unquote one of the best tackles in the league, and he still got some burnt to him. I wanted him in the offseason because I know we didn't have a ton of edge help. We didn't know if we were going to get Tibbs or, some of these other guys. And Jerry Hughes was from Buffalo, so I said, you know what, this kind of makes sense for the New York Giants. I don't know if that he would fit the 3-4 system that we were running, but hey, listen, why not throw him a 1-year prove-it deal? And looks like, I don't know what his contract situation is, but he's proving it to the Houston Texans right now, being their sack leader. And then we'll talk about secondary in terms of players to watch, which is next. Dameon Pierce, he, once again, has a head of steam. Going to go to his stats on the year real quick. He is, I believe, second in yards after contact. So the Giants better get him while he's just coming out of the backfield. That goes for the defensive line. That goes for Jalen Smith. That goes for Tay Crowder. That goes for Michael McFadden, Landon Collins if he's activated. So, just catch him while he's in the backfield. Now, he's got 678 yards on the season, 5 plays over 20 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4.6 yards per carry, and a total of 8 games. As I said, catch him while he's in the backfield. Now, he's only fumbled twice. He didn't lose any of those fumbles. But once again, with that being said, catch him while he's in the backfield. Don't let him run off for, a 20-yard gain, a 30-yard gain. I don't think he is the type to take it all the way from like a 50-yard distance or a 40-yard distance, but, my expectations could be very off. So Laramie Tunsil's another guy. I don't know his stats on the season. I think he's given up 1 sack. I don't know the pressure percentage or the pressures, but he's still one of the best tackles in the NFL. He's only given up 1 sack. He's got 4 penalties on the year. He's been that solid guy for the Texans ever since they traded for him from the Dolphins. He's just been a solid stone in left tackle. And the Giants, it's going to be interesting because the Giants do not have an established edge rusher. Even if Aziz was going up against them, I think Tunsil would win it. So kind of like, Kafka scheming up for the receivers to get open. I think Martindale has to scheme up for paths in terms of the edge rushers getting to the passer. And, last game you got a lot of interior pressure. Dexter Lawrence, he wasn't as active, but Leonard Williams was also there. He got a sack. And I'm looking for that to happen again because their interior isn't very good, but their tackles are better. Titus Howard's at least solid. Tunsil once again. So, I don't think Kayvon's going to have too many winning reps against Tunsil. Same thing could be said for a guy like Jihad Ward. Maybe you could fool him on just like a stun or something, but he's a smart football player and he's been in the league for years. So, it's going to be interesting. Definitely going to be interesting. Jerry Hughes, talked about him earlier. He's got a total of 19 tackles on the year, 12 pressures, 7 sacks. Played in all 8 games this year, 7 quarterback hits, 7 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and interception. I wouldn't say he's a game wrecker, but he has more sacks than he's had in the last 3 years. You have to go back to his Buffalo season in 2018 where he had 7. And he's going to eclipse over 7 sacks this season. I have full confidence in that. But he does play on both sides. It's not like he's Josh Allen where he plays just one side. No, that's not the case. Plays a little left tackle, a little right tackle. So Tyree Phillips, filling in for Evan Neal, is going to have his hands full. Phillips obviously probably saw him just a little bit with the Buffalo Bills. But, hey, listen, new team, new position. We'll see what happens. Now, I'm going to bounce into the secondary. I don't really think there's a lot of, linebackers to cover for their team, at least, some key names. I'm going to go through 3 secondary players. The first one you have to go through is Derek Stingley. Obviously, the hot topic in terms of rookie cornerbacks right now is Sauce Gardner, undoubtedly. But Stingley statistically has had a solid season, 1 interception, 62.7 completion percentage, allowed 400 yards. He hasn't given up a touchdown yet. 1 pressure, a sack, and a 78.9 passer rating. So not that bad. He's accompanied by 2 other corners that have had a solid season each. Desmond King, who's a former Titan. He's a former Charger. He's played with a couple of different teams. He was also a punt returner. I believe he still is a punt returner. He's given up a completion percentage of 70.6. He has an interception on the year. Only given up 94 yards and a passer rating of a 59.4. So, once again, very solid stats. He also has 1 pressure, 37 tackles, and then Steven Nelson, who we saw last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, the year before with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been around the league a little bit, but this year he's having, once again, a solid season, 54.3 completion percentage, 1 touchdown given up, 191 yards given up in coverage, and a 67.7 passer rating to go along with 2 pressures, a sack, and 36 tackles. And, I know there's only 2 players on this list out of the 3 that have sacks, but hey, listen, look for the defensive coordinator. Lovie V. Smith is, a defensive-minded head coach, so look for him to possibly tell the defensive coordinator, throw in some pressures from DBs, right? Test this offensive line, because outside of Andrew Thomas, you have Azudu, who's very inexperienced. He's still learning the game. John Feliciano, who is average at best. Glowinski's been kind of a disappointment. And then Tyree Phillips, who's taken over for Evan Neal. So, once again, I would look for them to scheme up some pressure rather than just win off the edge. Questions to answer. I'm going to go with one first before we get to all this stuff. Who do they fill up the 2 roster spots with? It could be Landon Collins. I would definitely think someone on the defensive line. Could be Ryder Anderson, Justin Ellis, Dexter Lawrence, Jad Ward, and Leonard Williams. That's what the defensive line room looks like. They obviously had that one dude from the Ravens come in. I think it was Aaron Crawford, and then he got cut. But they also have Henry Mondo they can activate. I think he's been activated twice already, if I'm not mistaken, so he might be out of activations. But actually, well, you use those 2 spots. So you decide, is Mondo better or is Anderson better? And I happen to believe that, in my opinion, Ryder Anderson is better. Now, do you look at the defensive backs room? And, do you think you need an extra safety? Right now, there's 3 safeties. There's Julian Love, there's Dane Belton, and there's Jason Pinnock. So you're going to be rotating those guys in. Obviously, Wink Martindale, again, certain opponents will run 3 safety sets, and especially down at the line of scrimmage as well, especially if they're playing a very good run defense. But, Dane Belton and Julian Love, I could trust them in run defense. I don't know if I could trust Pinnock yet because I haven't seen him. We haven't seen him too much on defense. So there's that. You could probably pick Landon Collins off and say, listen, we're going to, put you on the roster for right now. Also, something as well, I know that a lot of people may have not mentioned this, but I want to know how much playing time Isaiah Hodgins gets. That is the waiver wire claim from the Buffalo Bills. He was a 6th-round pick, I think, 2 years ago, and he's been on the practice squad ever since. He's a taller receiver. I think he's like not a chubbier. That's a little harsh there. Kind of a chunkier type Colin Johnson. He's got the tall frame. Also another name to mention, and they really haven't called him up or activated him. Trenton Thompson. He is a very good run defender, so they could use him for this week, but just a name we really haven't heard of taking any important practice snaps, so I wouldn't say, okay, Trenton Thompson's going to be their guy. But once again, it's going to be interesting who they fill the 2 spots with. They could also go with another tight end. Chris Myrick, obviously. Daniel Bellinger's hurt. Tanner Hudson. They could go with Cager again. They could also maybe re-sign Austin Allen, which I don't know that's in the cards right now, but definitely could be Cager again. Just thought of that one. He could also be an option in the receiving game. Daniel Jones missed him on that wheel route 2 weeks ago in Seattle. But, hey, listen, we'll see. We'll see what happens, of course. But when we go back to questions to answer, once again, I have a few other than the 2 I just asked. Can Saquon get over 100 yards after struggling versus Seattle? I think he could. I think he also could get in the 70 range, and he could also get within the 50 range, and they could just totally stonewall him and force the Giants into a one-dimensional offense. Don't really want that. Not necessarily ideal, but it could happen. It could happen. So I think he could honestly get over 100 yards. If you ask me right now, I think he gets between 70 and 90. Is Kenny Golladay a factor in the game? We have, I think, 7 receivers on the roster. I would possibly bet that one of them being inactive. It could be Isaiah Hodgins. It could be Richie James. It could be David Sills. But Kenny Golladay, I would like him to get at least 3 catches. I'm not going to lie. Now, obviously, we need some sort of an extension of the passing game. I would like Kenny Golladay involved. A 3rd down and long, one of them longer post routes, I think he's definitely good with. So, hopefully he's a factor in some way, shape, or form. And also, he is a solid blocker in the running game. So there's that. How much more does Nick Gates play in Week 10? With Cager not necessarily having the blocking profile, same can be said for Tanner Hudson. I think he plays, once again, a little bit more of that extra tackle spot. I would personally like him at some point in the season, either to start or play along the offensive line, because, extra tackle's great, but for a guy who's coming off an injury, he kind of needs a test in terms of the offensive line. Like, you're probably not putting him at right tackle, but one of those 3 interior positions I think is definitely possible. But he does, in my opinion, play a little bit more in Week 10. I don't know how many snaps he got. I think he got 5 snaps against Seattle. And maybe they'll factor Jack Anderson in there as well. But also, you have to factor in If you have two offensive linemen as your two extra tackles, jumbo tight ends, that's going to give away most likely either a max protect or a run, most likely run. The next question before we go to the defense, will Daniel Jones achieve over 200 passing yards? Personally, I think this is a defense you need to do it against. Their secondary, in terms of their cornerbacks, is very good, but it's not like they're Dallas's secondary. It's not like they're the Eagles' secondary. I honestly need Daniel Jones to go over 200 yards. If you want to prove something in the second half, start it on fire here. You could still be a game manager and throw for over 200 yards. And we need to know, or at least have the confidence in that, okay, if Saquon's not running well or the offensive line's not blocking well and they're filling the gaps, that we have a solid option in the passing game, and that all starts with the quarterback. So there's that. Can the defense rack up pressure on the interior? I do have a stat, thanks to the Giants newspaper podcast, whatever the hell their name is. So 10 sacks and 48 pressures between Kenyon Green, I think it's Scott Quessenberry. There's a David Quessenberry, he plays for the Bills, but Scott Quessenberry and A.J. Cann. Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, maybe even Ryder Anderson. Get some pressure. I don't think Jelly's going to get pressure. He's never been that type of guy. I don't think he even has a sack at the NFL level. But also in the running game as well. I mean, they pull Kenyon Green a lot. They pull Tunsil a lot, but just speaking in terms of that interior, I think it's going to be the most important because, Titus Howard's at least average. Laremy Tunsil's dominant in left tackle, probably the second, third best left tackle in the league outside of Andrew Thomas. You need to force some pressure up the middle. I think that's going to be one of the most important things. Hang on to Davis Mills, have him throw the ball away, all that other good stuff. And will Kayvon get another sack? I need to see a little bit more out of him in the second half. I'm not going to lie to you. Obviously there's some games where he's been quiet, some games where he hasn't been quiet. Obviously he missed the first few games due to injury. I know that the offensive linemen from the other teams have been holding him. That's just a pure fact. But try selling it a little bit more. Try being just productive a little bit more. I mean, he is a first-round pick, so I don't think it's unrealistic to say, okay, he needs to produce a little bit more in his circumstances that he's facing right now. I don't think that's uncommon, and I don't think that's unnecessary to ask. So, let's move into keys to win. And also prediction at the end. So keys to win. I'm going to say number one's run with Barkley. Normally, and I'm going to cross into two right now, stop Dameon Pierce. First of all, I am scared of Dameon Pierce to a sense, but I think we could stop him as well. Also, as I mentioned earlier, they're like 25th in terms of rushing yards per game. So it's not the end-all, be-all for them in terms of production. They lean on it, but doesn't mean you're always productive with it. So that's two, but one, run with Barkley. I mean, they don't have too many good linebackers. Petrie is solid in the running game. Their defensive line, not many notable characters other than Jerry Hughes, but I don't know how his run defense is. And they're just not a very good run defense. They're 32nd. Take advantage. Take advantage, get creative, throw into Breida, throw into Robinson, throw into Richie James if he has hands. So run with Barkley, just get that running game going, and then stop Dameon Pierce. And then number three, I talked about it earlier, you got to get an effective passing game going. I don't care, if Saquon is doing great and he's got over 100 yards in the first half or he's got 10 yards in the first half. The Giants need a passing game to lean on, especially in the second half, but they need it in this game, in my opinion. Yes, their secondary is solid. Their corners are solid. But we got in trouble last game because they pressed our wide receivers. And Daniel Jones was missing guys. I thought that was a bit of a step-back game for him. That's not being a good thing. But we have to get an effective passing game going. I am still of the belief, and I subscribe to the theory, that in this day and age of football, passing game gets you a little bit more in terms of success than the running game does. You can only rely on the running game for so long. But it's also nice to have a balance of, okay, you have a solid passing game and you have a solid running game too. So run with Barkley. Overall, just get that running game going. Stop Dameon Pierce and get an effective passing game going. And one thing I will add before I go to my prediction is that Davis Mills, like other quarterbacks we've seen, or at least faced statistically, is completing 65.8% of his passes with 5 touchdowns and no picks against the blitz this season. So, I'm still throwing 100%, blitzes, not 100%, but I'm still throwing the amount of blitzes. At least if I was the defensive coordinator, I would at any other quarterback that I would throw at Davis Mills. Davis Mills, I'm going to be fair with you guys, is a game manager. He doesn't fucking scare me. Now, if he lights up the defense, I'm going to retract my words and yell and scream and rant, because this is a game the Giants should actually win. I'm going to go right into it. I'm picking the Giants to win this game. This is a game, in my personal opinion, that needs to be a statement game. Normally, you would pick, they got to win against the Cowboys. That's a statement game. Win against another rival. That's a statement game. You need to win this game by 2 scores. I'm going to say it right now. 10 points, 13 points, 17 points, I don't care. This opponent plays close in the first half. At least, I watched one game closely. That was the Eagle game, Thursday Night Football. I actually called it as a part of the Dead Red podcast. But my point is, you can't be relying on just winning by 1 score the entire season. I can't say your ass kicked, but you got kicked in the balls a little bit against Seattle when they basically ended the game with a lot of different things, and you can put your factors in whatever, but they won by 2 scores. It's our fucking time to win by 2 scores. Take advantage, because Detroit, it's going to be closer than everybody seems or expect it's going to be. Obviously, Dallas is going to be close. It's going to be hard. Same thing with Washington and Philadelphia after that. But, it's somewhat of a favorable schedule in the second half, but at the same time, you have to really play well against some of these lower-ranked opponents. The Colts is one. You could probably win by 2 scores, because whether you like this Jeff Saturday thing or not, their quarterback is Sam Ehlinger. I think that should be easier than some of the games that we're facing, some of the games that we have in these next few weeks, I should say. I don't want to say games, 2 times in a sentence. But this is a game the Giants need to win by 2 scores. No doubt. And if they don't win by 2 scores, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm going to be disappointed. You're coming out of a bye. Yes, the Texans are on extra rest, but you're coming out of a bye. You're a better team than them. You are a better coach than them. Better talent. They have 1 win on the season, and we have times fucking 6 of that. Let's go get the 7th win. Like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or a video drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Apologies for, once again, not having a Texans guest on. It was very hard to find a Texans guest, and really none of them replied to me. We'll be back on schedule, of course, with the podcast now that the bye week is gone. Same thing can be said in terms of getting interviews. So next week I'll be back on with a Lions reporter or a Lions journalist, blogger, whatever, so we can get the full scoop on the Lions and stuff like that. Appreciate y'all for coming out. Let's go get us a big blue win on Sunday against the Texans. Glad Giants football is back after a week off. Peace out. See you later. Stay cool. And let's go Big Blue.